Well, I was born here in Berlin. My great-grandfather came down from St. John, New Brunswick. They were Irish. They came from Ireland to St. John, New Brunswick. And the story I understand is that if you had enough money to get to the new continent, you landed in New Brunswick. If you had a little more money, you got to Boston, and if you were a rich Irishman, you got to New York City. Well, we ended up getting off in St. John, New Brunswick. And my grandfather was born there. So I grew up here, I was born here, and went to high school in Berlin, went to college, 4 years over in Waterville at Colby College, and had always been told by my father, who had this sawmill that I work at now, he'd say, it's great right now, but where's it going to be in 6 months? And we need to spend X number of $1,000s, we need a debarker, we need a chipper, and this is a tough business, it's not the thing to go into. So we fought for almost a year. But what happened was after that first year, he saw I really had an interest in the business. And the next 2 years were probably the happiest of his life, he told me, because it was fun trying to start up again and pick up used equipment. We bought a couple of trucks. We sold a piece of land he owned and bought a chipper and a debarker, which is what we really needed to get the mill going again. When I was a kid, they were still driving the river. It's the river we're on right now. And just a quarter of a mile north of here is where we used to get our pine logs out of the river. They'd be dumped in the river at Errol, New Hampshire, 25 miles north, and they'd float down the river, and then we would pull them out with a crane and put them into the mill. And there were some advantages to that because the logs were not affected by blue stain from the heat or pine borers or carpenter ants because they were submerged in the water. So it kept them preserved. And when you pull them up onto the brow to saw them, they were very heavy because they were waterlogged, but they sawed like butter. To make paper, you needed wood, water, and people. We had the wood, we had the water, we needed people. And Berlin was a microcosm of New York City. They were actually down on Ellis Island recruiting people to come to Berlin. They got woodsmen from the Scandinavian countries. They got people from up in Canada who would work on the farms in the summer but needed work in the winter, so they'd come to the work in the woods during the winter. They began buying machinery. The Germans were the machinists. We have a section of town that's named after the Germans, Goebel Street, and there was German Street, and they owned 2 machine shops in town. And the Italians came in 1902. The Brown Company built at the time the largest paper mill in the world, and it was built at Cascade, and they wanted to build it out of brick instead of wood. So the stone people, the stonemasons, were the Italians. So they brought an Italian settlement up, and they actually lived around the paper mill while they were building it. And many of them stayed after that, build homes, and that's called, well, Cascade Flat. And it was all Italians when I was a kid. And then the Russians came because they were strong woodsmen. The Irish were people who could work hard, and there were many nationalities that melted into Berlin at the turn of the century. Many of the churches in Berlin were built by the Brown Company because they knew if you wanted to bring people, uproot them and bring them here because you needed them to work for you, you needed them to preserve their culture. One of the big things was their religion. So at one point we had I think we had 11 or 12 churches in Berlin because all these nationalities worshiped together. At the turn of the century, Berlin was the fastest growing city in New Hampshire. By 1930, we had over 20,000 people. Today, we're just over 10,000 people. The economic vitality of the city has changed tremendously. So Berlin has changed, but those of us who are here see how great it is to live in this part of the country, and when you can make a living here, it's really a pleasant place to live. People are friendly, hard workers, honest, security. It's a great place to live.